We live in interesting times. For the headlines. Hurricane Dorian, heading towards Florida on Friday, was on track to become a major hurricane with a dangerous storm surge and potential for life-threatening flash floods. Prominent Hong Kong democracy activists, including a lawmaker, were arrested Friday in a protest crackdown, a move described by rights groups as a well-worn tactic deployed by China to suffocate dissent ahead of key political events. And I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. U.S. President Donald Trump canceled the trip to Poland as Hurricane Dorian headed towards Florida, strengthening on Thursday to a Category 2 storm. President Trump, who had been scheduled to attend World War II anniversary commemorations this weekend, said he would focus instead on preparations for the approaching storm. Take a look.
To ensure that all resources of the federal government are focused on the arriving storm, I have decided to send our Vice President Mike Pence to Poland this weekend in my place. It's something very important for me to be here. The storm looks like it could be a very, very big one indeed. Our highest priority is the safety and security of the people in the path of the hurricane.
Dorian's maximum sustained winds reached 105 kilometers per hour, making it a Category 2
and right now,
storm on a 5-level scale, the National Hurricane Center said in an advisory. Weather forecasters said Dorian could make landfall as a powerful Category 4 hurricane with the potential to cause life-threatening storm surges. Florida's governor declared a state of emergency, warning the millions of people who live up and down the eastern coast of the Sunshine State to prepare for a potentially major hurricane.
As you know, I recently issued Executive Order 19189 regarding Hurricane Dorian, declared a state of emergency in 26 counties in the state of Florida, pretty much the entire East Coast and adjoining counties. So one of the things that the state of emergency allows us to do is to get more fuel into the gas stations. I know people are going and looking. We've heard reports of there being fuel shortages already in places like Brevard County. This executive order allows more that fuel to come. It also allows us to mobilize the National Guard. Be prepared for a lot of water. You should have 7 days of food and medicine and water as part of your plan. The time to act is now. If you haven't acted, act to make preparations. Do not wait until it's too late. If you've prepared and then don't end up getting affected, no harm, no foul. But if you don't prepare and you are affected, that may be something that is difficult to recover from.
People at Bonita.
Well, I got my front three windows and 2 side windows that I'm going to cover because I feel that that's the direction the wind's going to be hitting it mostly. So 2x4s to prop up the palm trees, kind of keep them sturdied a little bit because I did lose a big palm tree in Matthew that was kind of the focal point of my front lawn. So
yeah, pretty soon we're going to be running out of pallets of water probably, and we're not. I'm not sure how much we have left.
Sunday and Monday is when the storms really get the real.
Canned foods are the big things, and I see a lot of bread too as well.
Canned foods are number one. I know I worked here today, and a lot of people are getting canned foods along with the water.
People at Bonita Beach near Fort Myers in Florida fill and prepare sandbags as Hurricane Dorian makes its way toward the U.S. East Coast. The hurricane could make landfall as a dangerous Category 4 storm. Georgia, another southeastern state potentially in the storm's path, followed suit for 12 countries. Governor Brian Kemp said the hurricane has the potential to produce catastrophic impacts. to citizens throughout the southeast coastal region of the United States. President Trump, who has properties including the Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, a politically important state for his 2020 re-election bid, also warned Floridians to get ready. The U.S. Coast Guard said ocean-going commercial vessels should make plans to leave South Florida ports at 105 miles per hour. Dorian is the strongest storm of the Atlantic hurricane season so far. If it makes landfall as a Category 4 storm on Monday as forecast, with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour, it will be the strongest hurricane to strike Florida's east coast since Andrew in 1992, according to CNN meteorologist Brandon Miller. To other news now, several prominent Hong Kong democracy activists have been arrested in a dragnet apparently timed as a warning to protesters planning to rally in defiance of a police ban that threatened to bring fresh violence to the city. Police said Joshua Wong was detained for allegedly inciting, organizing, and participating in an unauthorized assembly at Wan Chai Police Headquarters on June 21st. It's unclear what charges are involved, though the arrest comes hours after pro-independence leader Andy Chan was also detained at the airport, and a day after protests this Saturday was banned by police. Take a look. Meanwhile, Cathay Pacific has warned staff they risk being sacked if they join a planned Hong Kong strike as the airline intensifies its crackdown on employee support for the rolling pro-democracy protests. Hong Kong's flagship carrier, which has 27,000 staff in the city, has been accused of bowing to political pressure from China, whose aviation regulator has banned airline staff who have supported the demonstrations from working on flights through its airspace. In an internal memo to staff, a Cathay director, Tom Owen, said participating in a strike planned for Monday and Tuesday could constitute a breach of contract. Cathay has already fired at least 4 staff, including 2 pilots, for supporting the protests. A 5th, Rebecca C., a union organizer and cabin crew for its regional airline Cathay Dragon, says she was dropped from a Chinese flight rota and then dismissed a day later without explanation. The company has also issued a revised code of conduct to employees, including reiterating its zero-tolerance approach to staff participating in illegal protests. Protest groups are calling for a general strike on Monday and Tuesday, 3 months into escalating pro-democracy protests that have rocked the city and damaged Hong Kong's reputation as a stable business hub. A citywide strike early August brought transport chaos to the city. It was supported by Cathay's flight attendants union, whose members joined the walkout. More than 160 flights were canceled due to that action. And here's an update. Pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow walked out of court after being arrested on Friday morning, accused of inciting others to take part in unauthorized assembly, among other charges. Take a look. 2 of the Umbrella Movement's leaders, Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, both still well regarded among the city's youth, were arrested in dawn swoops, accused of inciting others to take part in unauthorized assembly. The pair were charged on Friday afternoon and bailed by the court. The main charge carries up to 5 years in jail. Speaking outside the court, Wong vowed to, quote, "We will continue our fight. We will not surrender," and railed at the chilling effect of the arrest on opponents of Hong Kong's Beijing-backed government as mass protests continue in Hong Kong now, entering what would be its 13th straight weekend of demonstrations. Authorities have worked to put down the protests. More than 800 people have been arrested since protests began in early June against a legislative bill that would have allowed suspects in Hong Kong to be extradited to mainland China. Meanwhile, Hong Kong police denied the accusation that the arrests of prominent democracy activists were timed specifically to defang the weekend's protests. Take a look.
Basically, timing of arrest does not dictate our investigation. And we will arrest the person as soon as we have gathered sufficient evidence to prove his or her offense. The allegation that we time our arrest is totally false.
To prevent potential public danger arising from this proposed public event, we make these deliberate decisions.
Hong Kong's crisis-hit government is scrambling to find an appropriate response to the unprecedented pro-democracy protests, which have by turns seen millions march, close the airport, and left city streets strewn with bricks and shrouded in tear gas. The violence has also damaged Hong Kong's reputation for stability and prosperity. China has responded with a campaign of intimidation, with a slick PR video released Thursday showing troop movements into Hong Kong as part of routine garrison rotation. State media reported that fresh Chinese military anti-riot drills were held across the border in Shenzhen. Meanwhile, an editorial in the China Daily newspaper said, quote, "Chinese soldiers stationed in Hong Kong will have no reason to sit on their hands if the situation in the city worsens." China's military on Thursday said fresh troops had arrived in Hong Kong as part of a routine rotation as the financial hub prepares for more political rallies against Beijing's tightening grip on the city. The well-publicized troop movement comes days before a planned new mass rally on Saturday, which was expected to draw hundreds of thousands to the Hong Kong streets. Hong Kong has sunk deep into political unrest, prompting Beijing to ramp up its rhetoric, describing some protest actions as terrorist-like. Permission for Saturday's mass rally was denied by Hong Kong police on security grounds, raising the likelihood of another weekend of clashes between police and protesters, who will likely come out in defiance of the ban. In a letter to the rally organizers, the Civil Human Rights Front, police said they feared some participants would commit violent and destructive acts. State media published a video of armored personnel, carriers, and trucks driving across the Hong Kong border. The protests were ignited when the city's Beijing-backed government tried to pass a bill allowing extraditions to mainland China. On Thursday afternoon, Chinese state television also released footage of the rotation of troops at Macau, another territory with special status with China. To other news now, opponents of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's move to suspend Parliament in the final weeks before Brexit lost the first of several legal bids to stop him on Friday. Scottish Judge Raymond Doherty rejected the request for a temporary injunction pending a full hearing in the case on September 6. The judge said in his ruling, quote, "I'm not satisfied that there's a need for an interim suspension or an interim interdict to be granted at this stage. Queen Elizabeth II has already given the go-ahead to shutter Parliament between mid-September and October 14, just 2 weeks before the Brexit date of October 31. The move was widely seen as limiting the time for parliamentarians to move against Prime Minister Johnson, who has said Britain must leave the EU with or without a deal. Legal bids to halt the suspension have also been launched in Belfast and London. Labour MP John McDowell, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, severely criticized Prime Minister Johnson's decision to prorogue Parliament until October 14, saying that the opposition will use every parliamentary device possible to stop a no-deal Brexit.
This is obviously a pivotal moment in British politics. The last 24 hours have, I think, revealed the true character of Boris Johnson, and I think, as importantly, the real nature of his politics. It exposed in Johnson what can only be described as a really deep-seated, arrogant sense of entitlement. Let me make it absolutely clear, and this is a personal message to Boris Johnson: bring it on. Bring it on. The issue for us now, and it is an immediate issue, and is that we've got to do everything we can, working on a cross-party basis to block a no Brexit. And we'll use every parliamentary device that we possibly can. If that has to include at some stage a vote of no confidence, that will still be open to us, that will be on the table. What we won't do is allow Boris Johnson to act like a dictator.
Yes, I am.
Now, Prime Minister Johnson announced the surprise decision on Wednesday to dismiss Parliament, known as proroguing, next month for nearly 5 weeks. The move sent shockwaves through British politics, triggering a furious outcry from pro-Europeans and MPs opposed to a no-deal exit. Wrong-footed Johnson's opponents labeled the suspension of Parliament a coup and a constitutional outrage. But Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said only around 4 days of parliamentary time would be lost.
Well, actually, we've had one of the longest parliamentary sittings in, I think it's almost 400 years. We've been talking about nothing but Brexit. We're going to get a chance to scrutinise all aspects of Brexit between now and the end of October.
Only about
There's
2 or 3 days.
one second. No, not quite right. There's going to be time before the October Council and after it. So I think the idea that this is some kind of constitutional outrage is nonsense. It's actually lawful. It's perfectly proper. There's precedent for it. But actually, fundamentally, for the people watching this, they want to see that we're leaving the EU, but also talking about all the other things they expect us to be addressing. That's what this government will be doing.
Britain's Brexit negotiators are to meet their EU counterparts twice a week throughout September in a bid to reach a new divorce agreement. Johnson said he wants to step up the tempo in talks with the European Union to strike a new Brexit deal. Prime Minister Johnson also wants the so-called backstop, the fallback provisions regarding the Irish border, scrapped completely. But Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said Britain had come up with nothing credible to replace the backstop.
We will not allow a really important element of the withdrawal agreement to be removed, i.e. the backstop, which solves a difficult problem, albeit on a temporary basis, and for that to be replaced with something that doesn't stand up for to scrutiny and is simply a promise that we'll do our best to solve the problem but not explain how. That is not an approach, I think, that either Ireland or the EU will support. We all want to get a deal, but at the moment nothing credible has come from the British government in the context of an alternative to the backstop. And if that changes, great. We'll look at it in Dublin, but more importantly, it can be the basis of a discussion in Brussels, but it's got to be credible.
Suspending Parliament.
Meanwhile, Labour opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn said he would try to start a parliamentary process that would allow Prime Minister Johnson's opponents to legislate to prevent Britain leaving the EU without a deal and to stop the suspension of business. Corbyn is also mulling a no-confidence vote in Johnson's Conservative government, which commands a fragile 320 to 319 majority.
Suspending Parliament is not acceptable, it's not on. What the Prime Minister is doing is a sort of smash and grab on our democracy in order to force through a no-deal exit from the European Union. What's he so afraid of? That he needs to suspend Parliament to prevent Parliament discussing these matters. So when Parliament does meet, on his timetable very briefly next week, the first thing we'll do is attempt legislation to prevent what he's doing, and secondly, we'll challenge him on a motion of confidence at some point. This is shutting down Parliament early to prevent.
Indonesia's Papua plunged into chaos again as angry protesters torched buildings in its capital after nearly 2 weeks of riots and demonstrations in the easternmost province of the archipelago. Take a look. More than 1,000 demonstrators marched around Jayapura, hurling stones and setting fire to shops and an assembly building following a deadly clash in another part of the jungle-clad province, which shares the island with independent Papua New Guinea. Carrying placards bearing the image of a banned flag, many called for independence from Indonesian rule and an end to racism against the minority group. Papuans are ethnic Melanesians and have few cultural ties with the rest of Indonesia. State power company PLN said the violence forced it to cut electricity in parts of Jayapura, a city of about 300,000 people. The confrontation sparked reports that Indonesia's military, long accused of committing rights abuses against Papuans during a decades-old separatist insurgency, had gunned down 6 protesters. Authorities, meanwhile, denied that claim and said they were attacked by hundreds of Papuans armed with machetes and traditional bows and arrows. Some 300 extra personnel had been sent to Dai to restore order, according to officials, after Jakarta deployed more than 1,200 police and military members to Papua last week. Conflicting reports are common in Papua, where independent supporters and the military frequently blame each other for violence. The government in Jakarta also ordered internet blackout since last week, making confirming and sharing information difficult. Riots and demonstrations have broken out in Papua since mid-August, with buildings torched and street battles between police and protesters. The unrest appears to have been triggered by the arrest this month of dozens of Papuan students in Java who were also racially abused. The Church of Christ's Aid to Humanity reached out to the elderly in Singapore. Here's Wei Macy for the report.
As part of the continued effort of the members of the Glacial priesthood to provide and extend aid to humanity, brethren from the local congregation of Singapore Northwest Ecclesiastical District of Malaysia held a Senior Citizen Appreciation Day in the community under the INC Giving Project of the church. This center caters elderly people, provide nursing care and daily meals as needed to their residents who are mostly affected by dementia. Under the INC Giving Project, brethren once again united in packing tokens of gift to show their appreciation to the residents. Volunteers from the church shared the quality time with the residents by cheering them up with the stories and fun games. Through this activity, volunteers and also the residents were able to interact and get along with each other companionship. Simple acts of kindness such as this indeed brought joy and smile to everyone. This activity is not only about giving gifts and games, but also to show the love and concern to the residents in Singapore despite of the difference in race and language. With the aim of the Glacial priesthood, that is to show their love to the fellow men, there will be more voluntary activities to be launched to help out the community in Singapore. From Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, this is Wei Macy and in 1-25.
Meanwhile, Macy Membrere takes us to Oakland, where the US Aid to Humanity Tour gave out donations, gift packages, school supplies, and many more. Macy?
Here in Oakland, California, on National Nonprofit Day, the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation continues its 2019 Aid to Humanity National Tour by helping local organizations that are committed to helping others.
The city of Oakland is listed in the top 10 most dangerous cities in California, according to the independent review site Safewise, and has a homeless population which increased by 47% from 2017 to 2019, as reported by the SF Chronicle.
This community really needs a lot of help. A lot of people never had a chance around here, you know what I mean? They end up in all kind of different things.
The Felix Y. Manalo Foundation gave backpacks, school supplies, and care packages containing non-perishable goods to residents of Oakland. It also gave checks to 10 nonprofit organizations within the community.
It's a great alignment that this is National Nonprofit Day. I know that the Felix Manalo Foundation and the Church of Christ that partnered on this would have done this regardless of the actual day, and so I wouldn't say that it changes the impact of who they are, what they are bringing to the community, but it is a great sort of reminder and sort of acknowledgement that this is a broader mission, a broader goal by which we come together as people, as neighbors, to really, according to the title of this event, provide our aid to humanity.
The Felix Y. Manalo Foundation is a role model for other nonprofits and also churches that have got to reach out into the community to be of service, to live God's words around compassion and giving of yourself to others. And today is an incredible show of those values.
Those in attendance described why the events of the day will have long-lasting effects on the community.
It was really beautiful, and I'm really thankful that you guys came by and did this. I just like the things that need to change around here, you know, and it takes this to do it, to show the people that people still care.
By expressing love for your neighbor, by giving what little you have and sharing it with others, that act is like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples will go forever. They will spread. The memory of that will live in this community. And for that reason, people will feel loved and taken care of. And that is a great gift.
This national tour of Aid to Humanity is part of a global effort to provide assistance to not only local communities, but to people all around the world. From Oakland, California, I'm Macy Membury, 1/25.
Thank you, Macy. Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
It's a Friday, 2 to 2:30 p.m.
Property firms suffered hefty losses in Hong Kong on Friday as the arrest of leading pro-democracy figures wiped out an early rally in the Hang Seng Index, fueled by fears of fresh violence in the city. News of the arrests overshadowed a broad advance across other Asian markets that came after China said it would not retaliate against the latest U.S. tariffs, which raised hopes for an easing of trade tensions between the economic giants. Police on Friday held Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow a day before another planned mass rally on the 5th anniversary of Beijing's rejection of a call for universal suffrage in the city, which sparked the umbrella movement in 2014. Hours earlier, another vocal independence campaigner was detained at Hong Kong's airport.
And we believe that the high-profile arrest before the 31st of August protest is because they want to spread right terror towards the Hong Kong protester and the Hong Konger. Secondly, they are really accusing the demonstrations members and different high-profile activists in the movement to try to create a fiction atmosphere that there is a leaders who are leading the campaign. He is arrested by the law of the inciting unlawful assembly, organizing unlawful assembly, and taking part into the unlawful assembly. And another demonstrations member, Agnes Chow, are being arrested of inciting unlawful assembly.
The latest developments have raised concerns that the months-long and increasingly violent protests will continue for some time or could even see the government impose emergency laws. The Hang Seng ended up 0.08% or 21.23 points at 25,724.73. The benchmark Shanghai Composite Index lost 0.16% or 4.68 points to 2,886.24. And the Shenzhen Composite Index, which tracks stocks on China's second exchange, slipped 0.74% or 11.83 points to 1,579.25. Among the worst affected, Swire Properties dived 3.56%, Sinoland sank 1.75%, Sun Hung Kai Properties tumbled 1.77%, and New World Development lost 1.81%. Japan's defense ministry on Friday requested a record $50.3 billion budget to fund purchases of fighter jets and missile defense as the country eyes the threat from North Korea and China. The 5.32 trillion yen or $50.3 billion request for the year from April is 1.2% higher than last year's, marking an 8th straight increase. The funds are intended to pay for big-ticket items, including 6 state-of-the-art F-35B fighters capable of vertical takeoffs, as well as the upgrade of 2 existing destroyers to serve as aircraft carriers for F-35Bs. The budget also seeks money for the ongoing purchase of U.S.-made Aegis Ashore missile defense systems and the development of a Japanese next-generation fighter jet. Japan's gradually expanding defense budget reflects the policies of hawkish Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who has steadily upgraded the nation's military in the face of missile and nuclear threats from North Korea and increased military activity in the region by China and Russia. Prime Minister Abe has also courted U.S. President Donald Trump by actively purchasing U.S. military products and repeatedly highlighting the Washington alliance as a cornerstone of Japan's diplomacy. The budget request comes as Japan's relations with fellow U.S. ally South Korea hit a new low over issues related to World War II and Japan's brutal occupation of the Korean Peninsula. But Japanese officials said South Korea's recent decision to scrap a bilateral agreement on military intelligence sharing did not affect the budget request. President Trump launched a new Pentagon command dedicated to warfare as American Armed Forces chiefs see China and Russia pressing hard to erode the U.S. advantage in the newest military frontier. Take a look.
We're gathered here in the Rose Garden to establish the United States Space Command. It's a big deal. As the newest combatant command, SpaceCom will defend America's vital interests in space, the next warfighting domain. And I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. It's all about space. Each of the United States military's combatant commands has an area of responsibility, from CENTCOM, which oversees our mission in the Middle East, to our most recent CyberCom, which we established just last year to protect Americans from the most advanced cyber threats, and also to create very, very severe and powerful offensive threats should we need them. SpaceCom will soon be followed, very importantly, by the establishment of the United States Space Force as the sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces. The Space Force will organize, train, and equip warriors to support SpaceCom's mission. SpaceCom will ensure that America's dominance in space is never questioned and never threatened, because we know the best way to prevent conflict is to prepare for victory. Budgets of $700 billion, $716 billion, and now $738 billion. And that money is now building the most advanced equipment anywhere on Earth, equipment that nobody even could have conceived of even 2 years ago. It's very necessary, and hopefully we'll never have to use it. To establish the United States.
Air Force General John Raymond, who will lead the new command, said ahead of the White House ceremony that U.S. rivals China and Russia are already pouring huge resources into space operations, where they believe they can, in a conflict, diminish U.S. advantages. The challenges range from adversaries jamming communications and GPS satellites to, as China demonstrated in 2007, ground-launched missiles used to physically destroy satellites. The Chinese electronics company Xiaomi showcased two of its newest smartphones in a launch ceremony on its new campus in Beijing. Take a look. Xiaomi Vice President and Redmi Chief Executive Officer Lu Weibing unveiled Redmi Note 8 and Redmi Note 8 Pro to the audience in Xiaomi Science and Technology Park. He said, "We offer four 6,400 megapixel cameras," announced Lu Weibing, speaking on the phone's quad rear camera, which in the Pro version is capable of capturing photos with the highest resolution rate possible in smartphones. While the smartphones have not been released yet, they've already been booked for purchase a whopping 2 million times. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Ako ang panlaw sa gitna ng dilim. Ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang maglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Tungkulin ng MTRCB ang mag-provide na appropriate
Welcome back. Australia downgraded the Great Barrier Reef's long-term outlook to very poor for the first time on Friday, as the World Heritage Site struggles with escalating climate change. In its latest 5-yearly report on the health of the world's largest coral reef system, the government's Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority singled out rising sea temperatures as the biggest threat to the giant organism. The government agency said the significant and large-scale impacts from record-breaking sea surface temperatures have resulted in coral reef habitat transitioning from poor to very poor condition. The agency said the outlook, downgraded from poor in 2014 to very poor, now reflected the greater expanse of coral deterioration across the massive reef, notably following back-to-back coral bleaching events caused by sea temperature spikes in 2016 and 2017. The United Nations had asked to receive the latest update on the reef's health by December so that it can determine whether the site can retain its World Heritage status when UNESCO next considers the issue in 2020. The reef is estimated to be worth at least $4 billion a year to the Australian economy, serving as a magnet for tourists and the emblem of the country. And as the planet's polar ice sheets destabilize amid rising temperatures, a landmark UN assessment of Earth's retreating frozen spaces is also set to spell out how melting mountain glaciers will impact humanity in the decades to come. AFP has obtained an official draft summary of the forthcoming Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report on oceans and the Cyrosphere. And it said that the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets lost roughly 400 billion tons of mass annually in the decade to 2015, corresponding to a sea level rise of around 1.2 millimeters each year. Take a look.
But definitely from one year to the next, the glaciers here are disappearing. And if you look carefully, you can see it with the naked eye. These glaciers are retreating quickly, sometimes 1 kilometer to 3 or 4 kilometers per year. And that leaves behind a scar along the edge of the canyon walls. And you can see this pretty readily. And if you look at the satellite data, it's also very obvious. So Greenland's definitely melting, and this year has been incredibly warm. As we've flown over the ice sheet this year, we've seen evidence of melt pools, not just in the coast, but far inland, even at very high elevation. So it's been a really warm year, and I think it could be a record year of ice loss for Greenland. Well, it's definitely alarming the speed with which Greenland is losing mass. It's big and it's increasing. The rate of ice loss here in Greenland appears to be accelerating over the last couple of decades, and it has the potential to reach very high rates, causing sea level rise all around the world. So the billions of tons of ice lost here every year have an impact not just in Greenland, but all across the planet. The glaciers here retreat by a process called calving. So every year they break off big chunks of ice, but when that breaking off happens faster and faster, the glaciers retreat into their canyons. This often causes them to speed up and dump ice more quickly. So the entire process has a result of Greenland losing more and more mass and causing more and more sea level rise.
There are roughly 200,000 glaciers, vast ancient reserves of ice on Earth, and their relative smallness compared to the polar ice sheets makes them especially vulnerable to rising temperatures. Their retreat is likely to impact inland communities for the world over, for whom glaciers are a key water source. The glaciers, nestled high in the Himalayas, provide water for 250 million people in nearby valleys and feed the rivers upon which a further 1.65 billion people rely for food, energy, and income. One study referenced in the IPCC report warns that Asian high mountain glaciers would lose more than a third of their ice even if humans slash greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. A continuation of business as usual in the coming decades, with a global economy still powered mainly by fossil fuels, could see two-thirds lost. The IPCC summary said that areas of the central and western Himalayas are already facing a noticeable fall in water for irrigation. The summary also warned that in regions with little ice cover, including Central Europe, North Asia, and Scandinavia, glaciers were projected to shrink 80% by 2100.
It's definitely alarming, the speed.
The EU's diplomatic chief, Federica Mogherini, told reporters that member states must adapt their military capacity to meet the security threats posed by climate change. She was speaking at an informal meeting of EU defense ministers in Helsinki. The Finnish defense minister, Antti Kaikkonen, also called for the EU to step up its defense and security operations. Take a look.
I think the European Union has been among the first identifying climate change as a security threat, a security challenge, a security threat multipliers for sure. And we have gone through the different connections, direct and indirect links between climate change and defense and security issues. You can already see the connection present very clearly in some areas. I think of the Sahel, for instance, or other areas where the military is deployed, being them UN, NATO, EU, or national militaries have to face a situation on the ground that is evolving in terms of climate change conditions. So we need to adapt our capacity to operate in these theaters.
Health news is up next. We'll be right back.
Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Officials say a 9-year-old Congolese child who tested positive for Ebola in neighboring Uganda has died. Dr. Eddie Casenda, Ebola representative in the Congolese border town of Kasindi, said the victim will be repatriated to Congo on Friday. A Ugandan official at the hospital where the girl had been in isolation confirmed her death overnight. He spoke on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to reporters. And the girl who was traveling with her mother was identified at a border screening Wednesday as a possible Ebola patient and isolated. Ugandan authorities believe she didn't have contact with any Ugandan. Ebola has already killed nearly 2,000 people in eastern Congo since August of 2018. And Europe has lost ground on eliminating measles. The European Regional Verification Commission for Measles and Rubella Elimination, or RVC, warned on Thursday. According to the RVC, at the end of 2018, 35 countries had achieved or sustained measles elimination as compared to 37 for 2017. Albania, Czech Republic, Greece, and the United Kingdom lost their measles elimination status for the first time since the verification process began in 2012. However, Austria and Switzerland reached elimination status for at least the past 36 months.
We have a safe and effective vaccine against measles. It's given in 2 doses, and every child everywhere who can get the vaccine should get the vaccine. This is a vaccine that works. It means if you're immunized, the likelihood that you will ever suffer from measles for your lifetime is extremely low. So every parent, every family, every grandparent, each community needs to support the vaccine system in their community, needs to go and get vaccines for their children. Measles is an extremely contagious disease. For every case of measles that occurs, among people who are not immune, about 18 additional cases are going to occur. As a result, when we have a measles case in a community, we know that that measles is finding people who are not immunized. It's essentially the canary in the coal mine. It's the pathfinder, or the identifier, the litmus test of people who are not vaccinated. And that means that they're probably not vaccinated to other diseases as well and are at risk of getting other vaccines.
In other health news, medical officials are warning residents about the rare but deadly Eastern equine encephalitis virus, or EEE, which claimed the life of a Massachusetts mother late last week. Now, the CDC says the EEE is a mosquito-borne virus that can cause brain swelling and leads to death in about 30% of those who catch it. The Boston Globe said Lori Sylvia of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, died while being treated for the infection at Tufts Medical Center on Sunday. She's the 4th case of EEE in Massachusetts this year and the first fatality. The virus has also been confirmed in a 14-year-old Michigan girl who is fighting for her life, and it's suspected in 3 others in that state. The mother of Savannah Dehart said her daughter was on a ventilator and could not speak, according to news reports. Massachusetts Public Health Commissioner Monica Barrell said, quote, "We are seeing the most intense level of EEE activity that we have seen in several years." Mosquitoes near the Cicero Swamp in New York also tested positive for the virus, along with several chickens in Florida late last month. The CDC says people infected with a mild form of the virus usually get flu-like symptoms or may even have no symptoms. For people who are more seriously infected, signs and symptoms include fever, headache, crankiness, restlessness, drowsiness, anorexia, vomiting, diarrhea, convulsions, and coma. The illness usually lasts 1 to 2 weeks, and deaths tend to happen from 2 to 10 days after symptoms begin. For people who survive EEE, the effects can be long-lasting. They may have disabling and progressive mental and physical conditions, quote, which can range from minimal brain dysfunction to severe intellectual impairment, personality disorders, seizures, paralysis, and cranial nerve dysfunction. An average of 7 cases of the illness per year were reported from 2009 through 2018. The CDC said there's no definitive treatment or vaccine for EEE. There's no therapy against the virus itself, CDC says, and they said, quote, "We just have to let the body go through its healing process." Residents are encouraged to protect themselves against the virus by using mosquito repellent. An artwork featuring an infinite stream of portraits of people who have never existed, all generated by an artificial intelligence, went up for auction at Sotheby's auction house in London. Take a look.
It's a really interesting work and something that we have never seen before, because what it essentially is, it's a brain that creates these images that you're seeing. So rather than a static portrait, it is incorporating the new technology, AI, with generative adversarial networks, which are kind of neurological networks that compete against each other and create these images. So what you're seeing is really the evolution of portraiture. You've seen this in paintings since the old masters, and what Mario Klingemann is doing is that he is creating this new work that looks at the past but is using the most up-to-date technology.
Footage shot on this day shows the installation piece titled Memories of Passerby 1, which is made up of an artificial brain housed in a walnut wood cabinet, as you saw earlier, with an ever-changing stream of unique portraits being sent to 2 connected monitors. Sotheby's contemporary art specialist Marina Ruiz Colomer said that the machine decides what to do on its own, creating and learning from its own mistakes. German artist Mario Klingemann built the machine, but all the images are reportedly created through the algorithms and generative adversarial networks housed in the machine's brain. All right, and that's it for tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Eagle News International, I'm Alma Angeles, always one with 25.